Thank you.
So I'm just gonna start recording now. But I think
Yeah.
James and I will I guess officially start now. But we have the ability to edit and whatnot. So Karishma, you missed a little bit of this, but James and I started SDGTalks after we were with each other for a week in China at the United Nations Unleash Innovation Lab, which was an awesome experience. Such a cool event. But James and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, this was cool, but what are we doing the other 360 days of year about accelerating SDG talks? So that's where we wanted to have a medium to help communicate different SDGs, and hence why we started the podcast. And through the grace of God, the way through reached out to James. So this is our first virtual video chat, and just excited to really learn more about all of you. And our goal with this is to create valuable content to the world. James, I'll turn over to James here to ask the questions, but want it to be free flowing and fun, while also have a little structure with asking some questions. So James, you want to give a little overview of the questions and sort of goals, and then we can kind of kick it off from there.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So exactly like that. We could have a sort of loose agenda, but of course this is like completely free flowing. We thought, seeing as there's 8 or 9 of us, it made sense that we all very quickly introduce ourselves. So this is just, who are you? My name's James. Where'd you come from? I come from Scotland in Edinburgh. And why you're passionate about the SDGs or sustainability. So for me, it's because I love nature and I love running and swimming, and I like having clean nature. And I know that for us, or for me to continue to have that, I'm going to have to try and live a sustainable life, and the world is going to have to become a little bit more sustainable so we can conserve our natural resources and prevent pollution and environmental degradation, just as an example. And then we just thought we could go through a couple of questions, maybe each of us, or we can sort of take it as it comes, but why, or what we think is the most important thing for someone or an individual to sort of champion sustainability, or like what kind of action we can take at an individual level. And then we could go more to sort of an organizational level. So what companies or organizations do we know of, or we've worked with, or whatever, that are doing really cool things in this space. And then on an even higher level, like partnerships, what kind of partnerships have we heard of, or know anything about that is just cool to share with the group? Because I mean, we all come from different places, or you all met through your course, and me and Kevin met over lunch in China, but we all have very unique, I guess, insights and experiences. So we can just sort of take it free flowing, but follow this like relative structure.
And to add on to that, this is the first one. Frankly, we'd love to do more. We also have the ability to do a live event in the future, to where we could have the people, the world tune in and ask questions. So that's something that we're exploring too. This right now it's not live. We're recording it and doing it live, but we can edit it and use it more in the future. So again, kind of reiterating James, we want everyone to go around for 60 seconds and talk about sort of who, what, yourself, and then we'll kind of bounce off questions and answer them ourselves. And again, just have fun. I mean, this is awesome to think about what we're doing right now and how we're connected. And I'm grateful to be part of it.
Yeah, completely. Should we just go from I don't know if we all have the same screen list, but you're first on mine.
I'm on my phone, so I can't actually see everyone. I have to like scroll back and forth.
If somebody's got the grid,
I've got the grid, so I'll
okay. You direct, Kevin.
And I'll start us off to give a little example. My name is Kevin Sofin, and I live in Chicago, Illinois. I've been passionate about water my entire life. Grew up in the Pacific Ocean, went to college on a lake in Wisconsin, and now live on Lake Michigan. And I had the opportunity to travel around the world with Semester at Sea in 2011, and saw people in Ghana and India and China that did not have the luxuries that I had growing up in California. And I knew at that point I wanted to do anything possible to bring safe water solutions to people. I've been working in water for over 10 years. I started my own organization 4 years ago where I buy and sell artisan craft wristbands like this, and then reinvest the profits into grassroots water projects. And it's my goal in life to just do water projects on the grassroots level with local organizations. And I also love to communicate and create content, hence the SDG Talks and this first virtual chat. So that is me. Teresa, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I am Teresa Maria. I am from Finland and I am an advocate for sustainable fashion in particular. I'm all about spreading the word about how better fashion choices can benefit you as much as the planet, and also to convince people to shop less but shop better. So that's me in a nutshell.
Cool.
Tua?
Yeah. So I'm Tuha. I'm from Sweden, and I'm currently a master's student in Kalmar right now. I'm studying tourism and sustainability, and I've always been very passionate about traveling, and I want it to remain as sustainable as possible, and I want to find solutions for that, and I want to educate more people. So yeah.
Awesome.
Evelyn?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Evelyn. I'm also from Sweden. I live in Stockholm. I have a different background than the rest. I'm an accountant, but I am also very passionate about traveling. And lately I've been learning a little bit on how to travel more sustainable. So I'm part of an organization in Sweden called Schysst Resande, where we advocate sustainable travel and sustainable development.
Cool. Lydia?
Oh yeah, so my name is Lydia. I'm from Spain, but I'm currently living in Sofia, Bulgaria. Here I study international politics, but let's say that my true passion project is my blog on sustainable fashion. There just as Teresa, I advocate for a cleaner fashion industry and so on. I have grown in the countryside in Spain, in a region that is severely hit by water scarcity continuously. So as well, growing in a farming family, I have always seen the problematic of what sustainability should be, and how the environment should be shaped, should be protected by us. And actually, I have been really passionate about the sustainable development goals for very long, and mostly since I started my studies in international politics, because I see them as somewhat of a beacon of hope and a common plan of progress, an international plan to shape a brighter and cleaner future. And in my blog, this is all that I talk about, how to tackle the climate crisis from a place of positivity and optimism. So for me, that's why I'm really passionate about them.
Awesome, thank you. And Kara?
Hi, I'm Kara from Canada. My background is in ecotourism, or my bachelor's degree and just kind of background is ecotourism and outdoor leadership. I've been super passionate about kind of traveling the world, taking groups on trips around different like trail running, yoga, just different outdoor activities. But I'm really passionate about ways that we can travel and bring sustainability into that, because it is a travel, like the industry itself is really high impact with planes and all of that. So because of that, I've really dived into just slower travel, intentional travel, and community-based travel, and just ways that we can see these places and really respect them. So yeah, I'm super passionate about sustainable travel.
Thank you. Marie?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Marie Wilson, and I'm from the Seattle area in Washington on the US. And I write as a sustainability blogger and really try and focus on sustainability within the outdoor industry, because I grew up near the mountains. So, hiking and skiing and biking, doing all these things. And I never really thought about how my sustainable actions would affect all of these hobbies that I had, until like a few years ago when I got into ultra running, and I really kind of start to uncover the intersectionality, or more so lack thereof intersectionality, between sustainability and the outdoor industry, which I found just really ironic. So really, I write about a lot of that on my blog. And yeah, I'm really passionate about SDGs because I think they really represent the core of humanity. And, without protecting and preserving our planet, I think all of the other SDGs are difficult, if not like impossible to achieve. So really focusing on how we can still enjoy the outdoors, but do it in a sustainable way that, helps save our planet and not hinder it.
Awesome. Well put. And Karishma?
Hi. Yeah, Karishma is the right way to say it. Thank you. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I just graduated from university a couple weeks ago, from home. And again, similar to James, I've just been like a big nature girl my whole life, and then went to school for business and realized that no one's talking about it and none of my peers are really even bringing it into conversation. And so I started being more vocal about sustainability and lifestyle choices a couple of months ago on Instagram and then on YouTube too, and just found myself in this great community of people online that are also interested in making a change. So that's me.
Awesome. And James?
Hey, should I go again?
Yeah.
Run through again.
Yep.
Like I said, I'm from Scotland, Edinburgh originally, but I'm actually sitting in Copenhagen. So I came here 2 years ago to study my degree in climate change, and I just graduated. I just received my graduation letter yesterday, so I'm now a master's student, or master candidate. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But like I said, yeah, I totally just love the outdoors and running. Two of you mentioned that you're into running, trail running, and I'm completely all about that, and swimming in the ocean particularly. And so my love for these sort of natural places means that I really want to protect them and make sure that they're there for people in the future. And that really hinges on how sustainably we as a society live and reuse resources and make sure that we don't have leaks in the system where things just pour out into God knows where. So yeah, it doesn't really hinge on one thing. It's just so many choices that we as individuals make, organizations make, that society sort of at large makes. But I was thinking maybe we could get right into, actually before, I know we had these kind of questions, but I'm really interested in, firstly, Cara, you mentioned community-based tourism, and I just wanted to delve into that a little bit further. If you want to share any more about
what is community-based tourism?
Yeah. So when I was studying ecotourism, I think a lot of people think it's just environmental tourism, nature-based tourism, and that's a huge component of it. But I think a lot of people, what they kind of oversee is how such a big part of that has to be, how are you directly affecting that community you're going into? So it's great if you're doing like this ecotourism tour and it's maybe like low impact, like you're not going with outdoor vehicles or whatever in a nature area and you're hiking instead, but how are like the money that you're putting into a place, is that going directly to those families? And also like, are you going to say like even consumerism, and are you buying clothing or things that are being produced from those families that the money goes directly back into that community? Or is it being bled out? And that's a huge thing with resorts as well. Like, where is that money going? So when I think of community, I think of very much the community is thriving in their economics in that regard. But then also like, say for example, I was just living in Guatemala this past winter, and there's a lot of tour companies that take you up the volcano there, and we were super intentional about trying to find like, hey, is there a local family that can take us up there and stuff, and is that doing more activities that are directly in correlation with the community there. So I think that's a really, really big component of, because I feel like, I mean, I'm sure all of you guys have heard this if you're into sustainability or any regard, but just how every dollar you spend is kind of like a vote to what you're supporting in life. So are you putting that money, is it going to go directly to that family that you want to support and not leaking out? So yeah, so community-based tourism can be very much like the money going into the community, who's running the tours and all of that, but just very much at a super local level.
And one kind of add-on I want to encourage to all of you is, it seemed like when we went around initially, a big trend amongst the 9 people on this call, particularly maybe not as much me, but I want to learn more, is the sustainable fashion and sustainable travel. And it seems like there's some intersection there. And Cara, you just gave a good example of what is that community-based tourism. But I think to elaborate more on that, to all of you, is sort of what are some specific things that individuals can do to be a more sustainable traveler, or to focus more on community-based support travel? I mean, you hear these terms and you see some of these big blogs or whatever, and it's sometimes over someone's head, but what are some individual tangible things that all of you do or you're aware of? And again, I think if you got it, just start speaking, or if you want to talk, just raise your hand or interrupt each other, whatever works.
I could go again, but I can let someone else as well.
Well, I think the first step is to educate yourself and also educate others about it, about what you're learning. I think like as a traveler myself, there's a lot of things that I don't know that I haven't really seen before I started to study this program. Like the thing, like small things that I haven't even thought of. For example, how I don't know, like ecotourism, like it sounds like a great thing, right? But sometimes it's also just greenwashing. So yeah, I think the best thing that you can do as an individual is to just get interested and get educated, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to do research, and yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think this is a very big problem in the whole conversation of sustainability, because I don't think that people out of the blue, they think about the impact that their actions have in, let's say, in ethical terms or in the environment. So I go to Zara or to H&M, I buy a t-shirt, and I'm not thinking about the person who made that t-shirt, even if that meant suffering from them, from their part of, or if they are being underpaid. I don't necessarily think about that. Or in the case of ecotourism as well. So there needs to be education on this aspect. People need to be educated, and I think right now it's easier than ever to educate others and educate ourselves in these terms. We have every single kind, every information in the world, the information at of reach. So we just have to know what to do with this power that we have.
Yeah, I would say like doing your own research, but also not being afraid to like make a mistake, because I think there's like a lot of call out culture for people not being like eco-friendly enough when they're like making efforts, and you know, knowing that we are going to have an impact on this planet by just living. We have an impact on this planet, and you know, having the efforts that you can and doing your research like everyone has been saying, and educating yourself, but also practicing grace with yourself and with others, and asking for help if you feel overwhelmed or lost, or you're not executing, you know, your ecotourism or any aspect of sustainability in the way that you really want to.
That's a really good point. And something like, as a concrete example of what I would do, like what I do when I travel, I like to go like to this local level, sort of. Like, I don't want to go to those tourist sort of restaurants that are just like overpriced and the food is shit. I usually just ask straight from the local people, where do you go when you go out to eat? And they give me usually the most amazing teeny tiny places, usually a little bit further away from the city center, but they are amazing. And I would rather give my money to those people, they're usually family businesses as well, than to these huge corporations running these chains of restaurants in the city centers.
And you really get to immerse yourself in the culture, and it's
thing.
probably a lot cheaper as well. So it's like you win
as well.
on many fronts.
Yeah, and the food is better. So
yeah, exactly. You might get like a free dessert or something. You're like, wow, this is
I think to kind of go off of that is that I've had kind of a similar experience. Like, for example, I was lucky enough to go to Jamaica a couple years back, and I chose to go with an Airbnb that was run by a very small family in the mountains. Probably something that I would have never gotten at a resort or a hotel. But I think the best thing that you can do, and something that I did, is you come back and you talk about it with people. Like, I left them a great review. I told my parents about it, who told their friends, and then their friends ended up going to the same Airbnb. So like, if you had a good experience, or if it's something that you really enjoyed and you think that other people would enjoy it too, and at the same time it would be low impact, and like Kara was saying, supporting the local community, then like be vocal about it, tell people your recommendations, because people really trust the recommendations that come from like loved ones and close people. So I just think that if you had a good time, then don't be afraid to speak up and let other people know.
And I think a big thing with that, even going back to the SDGs for all countries, it's like similar to when you're running out in the mountains. It's like, wow, you're in such a beautiful place. Like, I want to protect this trail. I want to protect this mountainous area. The same thing when you're having those really meaningful community-based cultural travel experiences. It's like, you're not just going to this place, like you're actually seeing how these people live. You're getting to appreciate the culture and understand it that much more. And again, going back similar to the mountains, it's like, then it's just like, I want to protect this. Like, I understand this now. I get, it makes so much more sense to me instead of me just going and leaving right away. Like, then that whole idea of like, okay, how can we bring these SDGs and really like want them for every single country in the world and for everybody, not just for me here now, and not thinking like me, but just in like a global scale. So I think just like your respect and understanding of it is heightened by those experiences.
Well put. Yeah, my big takeaways from all that was just like all these little things you wouldn't think about, from asking the right questions to leaving good reviews. And Maria, I think your point's really important of, don't be afraid to make a mistake. I think so, too often, I mean, we all want to try and do our best, but no matter what, to have our impact be zero, we need offsets. Like, there's no way to have an impact to live without having some impact. So I think it's okay to try and even fail, to know then, hey, and then sharing those experiences. So, you know, I'd be interested to know from all of you of, you gave some good examples there, but what are maybe some efforts of success or some failures of sustainable tourism or sustainable travel that come to the top of mind?
Got one failure. I wanted to book a hotel that was supposedly green and all that. And I got there and immediately realized that it was all greenwashing, like all of it. But yeah.
What could you elaborate? And maybe this is the good way to put it. What is greenwashing?
It's a marketing tactic where you present your brand or company as this super eco and green, and maybe one little part of your company is eco or green. Like, for example, you might have packaging that is recyclable, but your product is exploitative and it's not recyclable, and it has nothing to do with sustainability or eco anything. So it's like, you just lie. It's just lies, basically.
Marketing, which is mainly
marketing.
And I think because sustainability now is a trend, and like, yes, I think that can be good if people are getting on it for that reason and hearing more about it. But I think greenwashing so much is, it's like, hey, this is a trendy thing. Like, we can market this to people, sell our product, and like have this little bit of green into it, and then just kind of forget about the rest.
Yeah, they literally just paint their packages green, and it's like, this is eco. It's
not. Put that recycle logo on it, even though the recycling.
With wording or putting the right image, like a clean river or a green valley, they just fix everything like that, it seems.
Yeah, like even with like plastic water bottles, like every label.
Oh, yes,
like,
those are my favorite.
And like springs, and you're like, oh, like that's kind of the most apparent, I think, thing of greenwashing, where most people, I would hope, are very aware that that would not be an eco-friendly product to buy or to support. But yeah, like everyone was saying, and also I think recently a lot of companies have equated like transparency to sustainability, when that isn't the case. I know, I'm sure the people who are probably more well-versed on like fast fashion can talk about this, but like companies like H&M have been recently said they're like the most transparent brand, when they're, you know, not really, they're transparent, but they're still not making the efforts to give their workers livable wages. They're paying them the minimum wage.
They're not even transparent.
Yeah,
not even that.
They just kind of have that title, so then their customers are going to feel good. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people see that and they think that they're supporting sustainable companies and that they're doing the right thing, when in reality it's just a marketing tactic.
Yes, and in the case,
No, go on, Lydia.
In the case of H&M, is as well very interesting that every year, twice a year, I think they make public these big campaigns about their sustainable collection. It's called responsible collections, I think they call them, and they are made with their fabrics are made with recycled plastic bottles, for example. But funny thing is that only a couple of garments are made with these more sustainable alternatives, or with organic cotton that is not really all that sustainable, that eco-friendly. And they really try to greenwash their image like this, and it's really worrying knowing the influence that such a big brand as H&M has.
A lot of you have been saying that, you know, there's quite a lot of greenwashing going on with different organizations in fashion and tourism, and that it's great, people should educate themselves. And I'm just wondering if it's easy for us when you're in the know to sort of be able to point out these things and be like, oh, this is obviously maybe a mistake and this is obviously a bad choice. But how do you think someone who had really no idea about any of this, what kind of source do they have for information? Or do you know of any organizations sort of fighting against greenwashing, or any sort of standardization against
fashion,
greenwashing?
there's a lot of standardization and a lot of different what are they called, like all kinds of categories that you can get, and also that's what I'm doing. Like, I'm trying to bring forward these brands that are actually sustainable and just shout about these big fast fashion companies so that people would be aware. Like, just Google fast fashion, you'll get all the high street brands right there. They're all fast fashion. Stop buying from them. Like, I just like repeat this as long as it takes for everybody to hear it.
if it's on the Google list for fast fashion, then it's a no-go. Okay, that's perfect.
I mean, that's like, they can start with that, and then we can go deeper. But at least start with that, because that's already like, just if you leave those, you're doing quite well already.
And maybe something like price can often be equated to things like this. You know, if it's really, really cheap, then maybe there's a reason for it.
£2 t-shirt, don't buy it.
Yeah.
I was going to say also, like, looking for specifics on company websites, whether it's like fashion or just any other product, because like Cara was saying, there are so many like buzzwords to like sustainability, like, you know, eco-friendly or sustainable, but looking for, you know, research that they've done of how their company is affecting the planet and actual facts of like how they produce their items and true transparency, not just saying we're transparent like H&M, because if a company truly is sustainable and they're making the efforts to try and be as eco-friendly as possible, then they're going to be proud about it, and they should be, and they're going to be, you know, really sharing all that information. So again, it can be misleading because as companies are doing more and more marketing, I think, for greenwashing, but really, I just like to go to websites and be like, okay, is it easy for me to find how their product is made and what practices are being used? And I think that's usually a good place to start.
Yeah,
I would totally agree.
Don't have anything to hide, so the information should be easily available. And if it's not, then you can be pretty sure that there's something wrong with it.
I would totally agree with that. There's a Canadian brand called Cotton with a K, and they have, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it already, but they have this great website where you go on and, you know, their homepage is about where does our cotton come from, who makes it, and just going off of what you guys were saying, especially Maria, was that like, if they're proud about it, they're going to flaunt it and it's going to be obvious. But for me, I know I started my sustainable fashion journey, like I would say a couple of months back, and I was someone who really did not know anything. I didn't know that like Zara and H&M were so outrageously unsustainable, and I educated myself through following like influencers in the sustainable fashion space on like Instagram and social media. And then there's also this great app I have on my phone, some of you might know about it, it's called Good On You, and they essentially just give a rating to most major brands on sustainability, on their ethics, on their fabrics that are used, on what they do with factory waste. And I find that really useful as kind of like a menu, or just a rating, very easy to just open up and check. If you are the kind of person that wants to be more conscious about this, there are resources out there like that app.
Great. Well, and I found it interesting, this conversation where we're kind of starting off with travel and options for that, and then the greenwashing, and then leading into companies that are maybe the biggest, most guilty greenwashers, whether that's plastic water bottle companies or fashion. But I think I'd love to hear about that intersection of sustainable fashion and sort of local community-based travel. You know, whether that is, like you talked about, buying local or kind of what in one line I heard earlier is every dollar is a vote. Sort of what are examples, or maybe kind of just riffing here, of that local travel to local purchase of sustainable fashion? You know, and I mean, guess maybe start with Evelyn. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that, or kind of to start with, if there's any comments or thoughts you have around that.
Can you repeat the question again?
Just kind of sustainable fashion on a local level. You know, what's your thoughts on buying locally when you travel, and kind of what are the impacts of that?
I actually am a huge fan of local fashion. I'm Colombian, so whenever I'm there, I always make sure to buy locally, because I know that the impact that it will have on the community is usually very good. But growing up there, I also learned to, because just because you're buying something locally doesn't mean it's good. I know that as a Colombian, I know that some of the people selling the stuff didn't make it. So when I'm there, I usually make sure that I actually buy it from the actual source and not from, you know, street vendors, because there are these people as well that try to pretend that they made a certain item. So, but I think it is important, but I also think that you have to be open-minded and also ask question of where the item comes from to the person that is selling it to you. And yeah.
Yes, that's really great. It's sorry, Cara. No, go on, please.
You go.
Okay. It's very important what Evelyn said about this connection between the person who sells it to you and the item and so on. There's this Turkish brand. It's a small family-owned brand. I think it's called Loops or The Loop, and they make shoes with upcycled carpets. So we all know that Turkey has a huge textile industry. So you have these very big textile factories, but then as well you have, on the other hand, a lot of family-owned businesses and family-owned small factories that do these kind of things, and they actually rework a lot of the textile waste, repurposing it for other goods, to make their own garments. And I think that's a very good example as well of how these local businesses, like smaller, family-owned and so on, kind of adapt to the idea of sustainability even more than big brands that have more resources to do so. So these families take these second-hand carpets and they turn them into shoes. So that's for me as well. I live very close to Turkey, so every single time I go to Turkey, I like to visit this kind of smaller businesses. They always have something very different to offer you. It's as well a whole different experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What I was going to say too, when I was in Guatemala, they're huge on textiles and you can get them for dirt cheap. There's just one tiny village there called San Juan, and I had the opportunity to go and meet some of the ladies and actually be making the cotton with them. I'd never done that before. And you like have a little stick and a spool, and then they and you like bring it out or whatever, and then they dye it after with like carrots, coffee beans, avocado, and that's how they dye all their stuff. And it was just kind of my first, because I'm not I think sustainable fashion is amazing, but I'm not really into fashion. But knowing now that, learning more about it now, knowing when I do buy clothes to do it more sustainably. But that was kind of when I was buying those textiles, it was seeing directly how it's like, hey, this woman has been doing this, and she's not, and they're more expensive because they're not doing it through the machine. They're actually using the big weave machine. And then afterwards purchasing the stuff, and they had the name of each lady in the village who made that piece. And I bought a bag for a friend there, and actually getting to meet that lady. She was like this 55-year-old lady. She told me that it took her 3 weeks to make it. And that was my first time of seeing that just direct impact. And it just, going back to like fast fashion, it's like, oh, I'll buy this t-shirt for $5. It's like, I don't really know the entire chain of events that it took to get there, but seeing all that work, it just kind of like reinstated, okay, community-based tourism with the with going money back to the economy and seeing that direct impact, and how that all kind of plays into the fashion industry as well. But it really kind of made that connection in terms of how what we buy directly can impact or negatively impact a person or place, and just kind of putting that all together. So
I really like that point, Cara, about the closer you are to the product, the more sort of respect and appreciation you have for it, and obviously the lower the impact is. And I think that kind of transcends just fashion. I mean, you can look at so many, you know, things with globalization, like the food supply chains, right? Like if you were to grow your own food in your back garden, the amount of emissions and other, you know, impacts, social impacts, environmental impacts, you know, that would reduce is enormous. And maybe putting in that effort of growing your own food, you might also respect more the food you're eating and not have so much food waste. And I think that's like a really good point, and it just transcends a lot of and I also especially think it's quite important now in sort of coronavirus times. People are maybe becoming more conscious of, and they're sort of realizing how fragile these long supply chains are for everything that we want to eat and everything we want to consume, essentially being clothing or whatever have you. And I think that maybe this is also a good time for people to become a bit more conscious about being more local, and how being local and community-based can bring down a lot of these sort of bad side effects from a lot of things we do.
And James, that's an interesting point that in this is a little pivot in maybe the discussion here, but I think we've all obviously been impacted, positive and negative, with coronavirus. And I think that it's taught us a lot of different things. And I'd love to hear from all of you about what's maybe one thing that you've learned and maybe that you're hopeful for in regard to the coronavirus, and how it's maybe changing the way we think about tourism, changing the way we think about climate change, you know, something that you've learned and maybe something that you're hopeful for that we'll do differently. Because we know the world will never go back to what it was, so how can we actually hopefully look forward? So prefacing that, I'd love to hear from all of you, and maybe go around, everyone go once, and kind of feel free to riff. So, you know, Teresa, if you heard that question, I know you stood up. Would you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I've seen like a lot of people come up to me on Instagram, for example, people I don't even know, telling me that my stories and whatever captions on photos or whatever have made them think more now that they're actually stuck at home. Loads of people have been furloughed, or they've been fired, they don't have any money to use anymore, and they're stuck at home, so they've been able to really like get acquainted with their wardrobes, sort of. And they're like, I finally understand what you've been talking about all this time, like, because I always tell them to shop their wardrobes, and now they know what I mean, because they're stuck at home, they can't go shopping all the time, and they realize like, oh, I've got all this stuff already, I don't need anything. Like, people they've been sort of forced to rethink their consumerism in a way. Like, that's how I've seen this whole thing through my network, and I love it.
Tua? If you froze, Tua?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it froze.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have both positive and negative things about the corona. Obviously, I think a lot of people in the West, we kind of realize how lucky we are that we have access to clean water, for example, and to know that we will not be the ones who are the worst hit by this corona. And I think it also makes us appreciate a lot more, like just being out in nature, for example, now when we're all forced to be stuck at home. But when it comes to like the sustainability thing, like one thing I'm worried about with this corona is if it will set us back in our sustainable, like the sustainable development goals, for example. Yeah.
Evelyn?
Actually, it has impacted me positively because I love to travel. Every year I plan a trip. But this year I actually have been decided that I would love to travel locally, especially within Sweden. which I think is also good for sustainability. Many people here usually just prefer to travel abroad, but I think, you know, for me, it has impacted me in a positive way, because it has made me think that I don't have to travel, I don't know, to another country for hiking or, you know, going to the beach or anything. I can just stay here and do it and support local tourism, which I also think is very, very important.
Well put. Lydia?
So the first thing that I thought about when you asked the question, Kevin, was these photos of the Himalayas being visible from India without these layers of smog and of pollution in the air. And I think that made a lot of people realize really how huge the impact we have is, and how really visible and how it really affects us. So in terms of pollution created by transportation, by planes, by cars, as well pollution created by carbon-fueled heating systems, for example. So personally, I have talked with a lot of people that have remade their travel plans for even the next year, saying, okay, maybe I live in Europe, so I don't need to fly everywhere. Why not using the train to go from point A to point B? And as well, this impact that the coronavirus situation is going to have in tourism is that international tourism is going to be very limited, at least for the time being. So people are going to travel more in their own countries, how others have said. So that will definitely have an impact on how we even see traveling from now on, that we really do have real gems in our home countries. We don't need to go that far. It's more complicated for expats like me, that I cannot go by train from Bulgaria to Spain. But for people who have more open choices in this sense, I think they will be more open to different options, more sustainable options to travel.
Yeah, and just quick point on both Evelyn and Lydia's point. I normally always go to Wisconsin, where my family is at. We've obviously been social distancing, which has been hard. But I've now traveled all around northern Illinois. I never would have done that, and I always kind of would talk negatively on Illinois because I liked Wisconsin more. But Illinois has actually got a lot to offer, and so that was something that local travel has been something I've been doing as well. So Kara, you want to go next?
Yeah. So when you asked that question, the first thought that kind of ran through my head, and this word's kind of been coming up lately for me, is intentionality, and just being super intentional about the choices that we make moving forward, whether that be, like you said, Teresa, about the clothes we buy or don't buy, but also in terms of travel. And instead of just being like, oh, I have the freedom to just book this last minute trip to this resort and be here for a week and come back, it's like, okay, there's going to be loopholes for us to get through, whether it be at the grocery store taking more time or plane and all these travel restrictions. It's like, hey, now when I do plan something moving forward, I want to be really mindful about how I'm going to go about it. Like, why do I want to go to that place? How do I want to have this impact? Why do I want this experience? And I think that can just go so broadly across so many boards or so many different kind of sectors in our life. But intentionality moving forward, I think, is just a really big thing that's stuck out for me.
Love it. Thank you. Marie?
Yeah, I think someone else mentioned this, but kind of something that I've been thinking about over the past 2 months or so has really just been like privilege and what that means, not just during this time, but moving forward. And speaking for myself, like, I haven't been very negatively affected from this. And I know that's because of the privilege and that I was born into and that I live. And so I think that it has also showed us that, like, it is those lowest income communities and those who are most vulnerable that have been hit the hardest from this virus. And as negative as that is, I'm hoping it shows people like the same is happening for the effects of the climate crisis and will continue to happen, where people who are really privileged might not really see any effects or be able to avoid them in a really manageable way. So I'm hoping that it shows people that, you know, we can use our privilege or the status that we were born into, or the country we were born into, to really make meaningful changes and not just kind of turn a blind eye and be ignorant of what is going on in the world around us.
Well put. And to round us out here, Karishma?
Yeah, I think what Teresa said at the very beginning kind of resonated with me because, like I said, I've kind of been harping on about sustainability on my social media channels for about a couple months now, and no one else in my community was really doing that or giving it much attention. But then as soon as the pandemic hit, people found themselves in this situation where they're having to, they can't go to the mall to have fun. And, the mall is like the great American pastime, Canadian too. And it's just, people are trying to find ways to do more with less. And that's when I started getting messages on my Instagram where I talk about, my first journey into like growing tomatoes or like trying to grow my own food, trying to make my own compost. I started getting messages from people, hey, you know what? That's actually kind of cool. How do you do that? Do you have any tips for us? We're just getting started with gardening. We're just getting started with upcycling our clothes. So I find that if anything, I mean, there are obviously a lot of negative impacts like we discussed, but the coronavirus pandemic, I think, has shown people that it's not so bad to lead a smaller life per se, like finding joy in things that are around you, things that are easily accessible, and things that are a little bit more low impact. I think it's showing people that, our decadent lives of the pre-pandemic world, maybe hold just as much or less joy than what we're finding now, being at home, staying with our families, doing what we can with what we have, I think.
Well put. And James, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was also having some thoughts as we were going through it, and I think it kind of wraps up, my thinking wraps up a lot about what everyone else has been saying, especially Karishma's points there about doing more with less. Working from home, I've been wearing these same clothes every single day. I've not needed to change my outfit once. I'm looking at my cupboard like, what are all these clothes? Like you just realize, my holidays now are planned. I'm hopefully going to get to go back to Scotland, or at least maybe be around Denmark, which is a very, very small place, probably smaller than Illinois by a long shot. So I'm very limited there, but I'm also like very happy to have all of these things available to me. And I think or at least for me, it's been a time to realize that there's so many awesome things nearby. And actually, Scandinavian summers are probably the best summers you could have in the world. So why would you want to go anywhere else? So I think, I think Karishma's point about you can do more with less is really something that stuck with me, to be honest. What about yourself, Kevin?
I think big things that I've taken away from coronavirus has been obviously taking a step back and really focusing on what is actually important. And to me, I care about spending time with my family and trying to help others. And I've fortunately not been able to spend as much time with my family, but I have been able to pivot to leveraging new social media tools and leveraging new content creation tools to raise more money to support more of these water projects that I'm doing in Flint, Michigan, and Navajo Nation, and different places in Tanzania. So it's been cool to see that develop. But I think kind of a macro perspective, the thing I'm most excited about is I think that the coronavirus is sort of a wake-up call to how we're going to deal with climate change or sea level rise, something that it's a whole world issue. It's not like, just one country, and, we're all going to deal with it differently, whether you're the city of Miami or the country of Bangladesh or the Maldives or Antarctica. Like, we're all going to be impacted differently, but impacted. And so thinking of this sort of global response as a team from all the SDGs, there's 17 of them, and granted, even trying to put them in those 17 is hard to do, but to me, that's sort of the exciting thing about coronavirus in a weird way, just to hopefully use this as a launch pad for how we can work together. So then I think we've got about another 10 minutes before it's the top of the hour. I want to be mindful of other people's time, but I think might be a fun way to sort of wrap this out is maybe everyone as well giving a kind of a final thought or a final point of suggestion, whether there's an organization that you are that is doing great work that you would like to make people aware of, or if there's ways for the world to collaborate with you or collaborate with others, what what are those, and what's kind of a final thought? And again, feel free to sort of riff and interrupt each other as needed. But to kind of start with that open-ended question, I'll start first with Teresa again.
Yeah, so an organization that's doing well, was that the question?
Organization that's doing good stuff that you have, that you would suggest, or if you have any ideas for partnerships with others, or if you're looking for partnerships, or just final thoughts in general.
Well, I'm always open for partnerships, that's for sure. But there's one university in Finland that I just really want to mention because they are doing incredible work. This is again about fashion, obviously, because that's what I know about. But they are coming up with new fabrics made out of trees, like an actual fabric made out of actual tree, not like viscose, but an actual tree bark. They are coming up with ways to separate. If there's a fabric made out of cotton and polyester, they can separate those and make them into new fabrics, because you can't recycle like mixed fabrics and stuff like that. They're coming up with insane innovations in terms of fabric waste, clothing waste overall, which is it is an enormous problem right now. And they're coming up with really, really good solutions, and nobody knows about them because they don't tell anyone. So I'm going to do the work for them. So Aalto University in Finland, they are doing incredible work.
Could you say the name of the university again one more time?
Aalto, Aalto.
Cool.
That's my shout out.
Shout outs encouraged. We can keep going around the horn here if that's okay. Tua?
Yeah, I don't have any organization in mind, like specifically, but I'm all about supporting local businesses, of course. Well, actually, there's one, but it's not a local one. It's called the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. They're a nonprofit environmental organization, and last fall, I think they've had some really interesting lectures where they invite people to I don't know, like last time we learned about natural dyeing, for example, or just like very educational lectures, and they're a really good organization.
Awesome. And Evelyn?
Well, I would say the organization which I'm an ambassador in is called Schysst Resande, and basically in English is translated to fair travel. And what the organization is all about is that we promote sustainable travel, but also we have people in mind. We think of basically, I think you can summarize the SDGs into this organization. It's not just about climate, but it's also about the education, workers' right, and economic growth. So I really like this organization because their goal is not to shame people for traveling. It's about educating them on. It's about helping them to gain more knowledge on. If they want to book their next trip, that they should think of, like, I don't know, for example, not visiting an orphanage or doing volunteer work for 2 weeks, because they educate us about those things and the impact that this type of traveling may have on a community. So I really, really like this organization because we do not only focus on climate, it's about everything else that that for me basically summarizes sustainability.
Well put. Lydia?
I definitely have to give a shout out to Fashion Revolution. It is a platform for fashion activism. It tries to really normalize sustainable fashion, and it's a platform that is really well known in the world of sustainable fashion, but I don't know for the rest of people if it can sound familiar. And fun fact, right now they are offering a free course on sustainability development goals and fashion. So probably on their website you can check that out because it's really, really interesting. It talks about how fashion goes deeper than just aesthetics and just beauty, and how it can affect our world and how it comes into play with the sustainability development goals. So, yeah.
Great. And Kara?
The one that came to mind is TIES, and that stands for the International Ecotourism Society. And they're just kind of like they've been around, I think, since like 1990. And they can really just kind of standardize what sustainable and ecotourism is. And it has a ton of great resources and educational videos and talks that you can just kind of learn more about it. And a lot of companies then can come on as members and kind of get like a standard seal. And then they also have kind of like a baseline practice that they need to follow in order to fall under a company that could fall under that, if that makes sense, but come with the Ecotourism Society. So they're a really good resource. And then I guess just closing thoughts too, I think it's really, this is coming off of TIES, but I think it's just really important that we have conversations like this, because we kept talking about education and stuff, and I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I'm leaving this just like buzzing with like new ideas, new thoughts, and I think these are just really, really important things, because then I feel like when we as individuals feel empowered, that's when we can kind of like go out into the world and continue to kind of create that ripple effect. So that's just kind of a closing thought on it.
Awesome. I agree 100%. Maria?
Yeah, I would say a big company within like the outdoor industry would be Patagonia, which is really well known, but they are making, I think, kind of setting the precedent for what a outdoor industry company should do, which is putting the people and the planet over profit, which might sound so foreign for a lot of companies, but really encouraging people to repair the gear that they already have, or they have on their website ways that you can buy their used gear and things like that, rather than just constantly getting like the new gear all of the time. And I think there's definitely room for improvement for them, but being one of the largest companies, especially here in the US, I think it really, is setting the precedent for how other companies should show up. So not that they necessarily need a shout out, because I think most people probably know about them. And kind of going off what Kara was saying for like closing thoughts, I think that, it is good to have those uncomfortable conversations. And I think in the past, maybe we avoid them. And kind of like I said earlier, we're worried about not being perfect, or we're worried about, not being just flawless in all aspects of our sustainability. But educating ourselves, having those conversations, reaching out to someone who might be more knowledgeable than you. Like, I don't know everything about fast fashion, and I would reach out to like Teresa or Lydia, or people that are more knowledgeable on that. And encouraging and inviting other people into that conversation in a welcoming, non-judgmental way, I think is key.
Well put. Grishma?
I was actually going to shout out Patagonia also, but I actually had the chance to work with Patagonia Toronto just a couple of months ago before the pandemic on a program where they just wanted to make the outdoors more accessible to people with disabilities. And again, like that ties into lots of other SDG goals, and I think Patagonia is a great company to support if you're looking to get into, first of all, the outdoors in a sustainable way and sustainable fashion. Their founder, Yvonne Chouinard, and I'm sure some of you have read this book, it's called Let My People Go Surfing. Really great book on how business and profit and sustainability can intersect in a way that, isn't damaging to one or the other. Another company I would actually give a shout out to is the Capture app. It's an app that you can get on your phone, and I just downloaded them. They reached out to me on Instagram, and I thought that's cool. It actually gives you a visual, very easy to understand representation of your carbon footprint, which is awesome compared to the average carbon footprint of someone living in your country. And I just thought that was such a great way, because I know that like when you preach to people, or when I preach to people at least, like, hey, don't use your plastic bag, or hey, walk to the grocery store instead of biking. It's hard to convince someone to do something if they can't visualize their impact, and this company does a great job of doing that and materializing that. So that's a great thing to look into if you're into that. But again, final thoughts. I'm new to the sustainability space. I'm always looking for partnerships. I loved being a part of this conversation and hearing you guys' different thoughts and expertises on travel and fast fashion. I just thought this is a great little chat, and I'd love to do more.
Well, thank you guys for participating.
Yeah, this is like a dream team we got going on here.
Yeah.
It's amazing to see all the different insights and perspectives that you all have from, I think
Yeah.
I counted 5 different countries, or 6 different countries within this call, and that's pretty cool. And I think we're all in this on the team. And I guess to kind of final the thought, James and I are really honored and excited to do this, and we'd love to do more. So we encourage you all to think about some other themes, some other topics, some other speakers. We can do this next one live. We can do future ones like this. So my final thoughts is I'm fired up. I'm really excited that you're all fired up as well. And this is one thing we can't control, so we should do more of it. James, any other final thoughts from you?
Yeah, totally. When Cara was saying the ripple effect from her, having these conversations and sort of making like a bit of a community feel around these topics, it really kind of, for me, harks back to when I met Kevin at Unleash. We were in China with 1,000 other young people discussing, sustainable development goals, and we were in our different tracks. And it's really interesting now that word, or the title, the name of it, Unleash, means so much to me, because it's just, the event itself did things, but it's all of the ripple and all of the unleashing effects of how I've evolved, and how that's kind of maybe allowed me to shed some of my previous, just things that would, your previous conceptions of yourself and things that might hold you back. So I think this is really awesome and really nice to speak to everyone, because it totally fires you up and totally just changes your whole mindset for the rest of the day, week, month.
And so please forward all the links to us. We'll go get this posted within the first SDGTalks virtual chat, and hopefully this is something that we can do once a week, once a month at least, and keep all the good momentum going.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That would be lovely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, but next time, you guys, sorry, Kevin, you were talking about having it live.
Yep. We can do it. So right now we're maxed at 6 people in live. It's in the software that I've been using, but we can have 6 people. So it'd be James or me plus 5, and then we can allow people to ask questions. So we could send it out, people sign up, and people can ask questions live. So it's a cool way to have interaction. And I've done some where I have 50 people. I've done one where I have 600 people, and that's a lot of eyeballs for a live event. And then we would then post it out like we're going to do with this. And again, it's cool because people can ask questions, and we can share documents and share PowerPoints and things like that. So would love to do that one in the near future as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Maybe it would be good to make, I think Instagram's good for communicating, but maybe WhatsApp would be a nice way of having for me, it seems a bit easier, but I don't know about everyone else. Just for communicating on future.
Perfect.
Yeah. WhatsApp would be preferred.
It's got time and things. I don't know, maybe Instagram has time, but it always seems to disappear.
Conversations get lost.
Yeah, we can do WhatsApp.
Great.
Yeah.
Maybe if we add our numbers into the Instagram, and then we can make one.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Nice to meet everyone and chat.
Yes. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey guys.
Bye.
Have a great
It's a lot
evening,
of
day.
voices. Okay. Bye.